Nursing was my life.
I wanted to help others.
But unexplainable things started happening.
I was completely unprepared for the terror.
There was a spiritual battle going on between good and evil.
It's hard to fathom until you're in it yourself.
On their first day, nursing assistants Garrett Fouch and Maria Weaver are taken on a grand tour of their new workplace, a large rural hospital.
This job was very important. I had just got my new car, so I had a lot of financial responsibility at the time.
I was fresh out of high school, so my first job as a nursing assistant was great to building my career, building my financial status. A great part about my job was that I did get to work with my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, Garrett.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Welcome.
Thank you.
We worked side by side on the medical surgical floor.
Most of Maria's work is in the hospital's medical records room, located in a dark, secluded section of the hospital.
It was a very dark room. And I had to go up there on a constant basis by myself. It felt like there was eyes on the back of your head the whole duration of your time in there. It was a very odd and unexplainable thing that the room was chilly in the midsummer time where it should not have been cold at all.
One of the most sensitive ghost detectors is believed to be the human body, and we're not entirely sure why, but some people seem to be able to register the presence of the paranormal, and they feel it in terms of chills and goose flesh and a racing heart.
Maria isn't alone in finding the hospital more than just a little unsettling.
I was making my rounds one night. And I happened upon a room where I heard a lot of noisy static. It sounded like a TV was on.
Was there anybody in that room?
There were no patients in that room at that present time. But sometimes staff members, they would go into rooms, turn the TVs on, watch them. So I went in and I tried to shut it off. I tried pressing the power button on the remote. The TV would not turn off. I tried turning the television off with the button on the TV. This didn't work. So my last option was to unplug the TV from the wall.
What happens next? Defies all reason.
It certainly was off-putting because there was no way for me to explain that.
In the filing room, Maria faces a much more ominous threat.
I could feel that there was something malevolent in that room. Every time I had to go in there, it was just that knot in my throat and every hair standing on end. It was almost like something was there watching your every move and just waiting for that moment to pounce on you.
So why even go in that room?
Because it was part of my job duties at the time.
What began as a strange feeling takes on shape.
Something finally did, from the shadows, float across the room. I was freaked right the hell out.
Suddenly, the shadow is gone.
It scared the living daylights right out of me. I didn't report this to anyone. I kept it to myself because I didn't want anyone who I worked with to think I was crazy.
But in the safety of her home, Maria opens up to Garrett.
Really strange things keep happening to me at work.
Maria is relieved to find Garrett shares her fear.
There were plenty of things that I was encountering that I was not prepared for, that did not make a whole lot of sense to me. But I had no idea how horrific things would get.
Back at the hospital, Maria tries hard to focus on her work, especially in the filing room. But just outside the door, something catches her eye. A wall covered with photos of former hospital staff.
And there was one picture of this gentleman. The eyes were glowing red. I was wondering if there was an exit sign, the red lights reflecting off the glass. There were no red exit lights near the picture. It was almost a feeling of warning. Something did not want me in that room anymore.
Nursing assistants Garrett and Maria are threatened by an evil force in the hospital. Maria ignores the ominous warning signs and continues into the filing room.
In retrospect, do you wish that maybe you had taken that warning seriously?
Yes.
Provoked by her presence, a dark shape emerges from the shadows.
I started to feel a presence in there. I did not feel safe.
There are a number of cases on record in which spirits are a real danger to the living.
I felt a hand on my throat, as if someone was coming up from behind and just trying their hardest to make it hard for me.
Dark entities behave like animals who like to inflict maximum carnage upon the living.
Maria breaks free and runs.
I felt pure terror. I just got the out of there. On the way home, I was not in any mindset to be driving home at all. I was scared out of my mind. When I got home, there was some doubt in my mind. Am I imagining all of this? Because that's when I realized whatever was in the medical records room followed me home.
These entities like to latch on to a living victim, just as they would recognize a potential source of free energy.
I poked the beast in the cage, and now I'm paying for it.
Terrified by the situation, Maria has no idea how to break the news to Garrett. Until she no longer has to.
Maria?
I looked up and saw this shadow flitting from one end of the wall to the other.
It was something that I couldn't explain. I felt whatever this was going to attack me.
These dark demonic entities feed on fear. The more terrified the victim is, the more they like it. It's like blood and water to a shark.
Then, it vanishes.
I felt very guilty because I knew that the reason the demon was there was my fault for provoking it.
Then, the presence enters Garrett's unconscious.
I had a dream that was very disturbing to me. There was this large demonic creature staring right at me with these large glowing yellow eyes. And it wanted me to know that it was there and that it was there for me. When I woke up, I could have swore for a moment that in the corner of the room, the face was still there. And then it disappeared. That was just undescribably horrific. I was truly terrified.
As the entity started to invade Garrett's dreams, now he finds himself afraid while he's asleep as well as while he's awake. This just adds more potential energy for this entity to use.
The next morning, Garrett and Maria are faced with a terrifying choice.
This was now a question of life and death. This was something that we had to get rid of.
Maria contacts an exorcist through her friend.
I realized I was in way over my head and had to reach out to someone who had experience with dealing with these types of situations.
The exorcist lives out of state, so she calls Maria to consult over the phone.
Hi. We're ready.
She commanded the spirit to leave.
Unwanted spirit, leave this house. You do not belong here.
Garrett and Maria prepare the house for the cleansing.
Sage is believed to act as a cleansing agent in spiritual cases.
You could certainly feel a shift of the atmosphere in the room. It felt like it was trying to fight back against what we were trying to do.
And that you may not return. It was trying to terrorize me, to break me down mentally and emotionally so it could win my house over against me.
I felt that we were both under attack.
Malicious intent! I was shaken, yet trying to be very strong and commanding.
Bless this house with love and light, and may you not...
Inside, I was scared all to hell.
Nursing assistants Garrett and Maria are terrorized by a demon that follows them home.
I felt like something was pushing down on me, almost trying to crush me.
There was a spiritual battle going on between good and evil.
The battle finally ends.
It was like everything that had been frightening us was gone. Like a stone had been lifted.
Finally, we had our home back.
The next day, the couple returns to their work routine at the hospital.
It was such a relief. Things were back to normal. But that wasn't the case at all.
This demon had returned to the filing room.
Once its ties were severed with their home, the entity went back to the place it was most familiar with, and that was the hospital.
To continue working in the filing room, Maria develops a simple but effective coping strategy. She ignores it.
This demon fed off my emotions. It fed off my fear. So I did not want to give it an inch to give it so it could come back home with me ever again.
Though they make peace with the hospital's paranormal forces, Maria and Garrett leave soon after, move out of state, and get married.
We left the hospital behind to pursue our dream of moving to the state of Maine.
To better our lives in general, we always wanted to move up there.
But for those left behind, life on the hospital's second floor carries on.
You think the demon's still there?
I suspect that that demon is still in that file room, quite happily so.
Okay, ready, Ailing? Okay, so take me back to the start of your story.
I was working at a skilled nursing facility. I was driven towards the medical field. I went into ambulance, and then I went to work at a hospital, and now I'm a nurse. And now I've found exactly where it is I need to be.
Other than her job, Eileen's entire world revolves around her close-knit family.
Hello? Oh, hi, Mom.
For whom she's never more than a phone call away.
What is it? What's wrong?
My mother called me to tell me that my aunt had gone into surgery to have a tumor removed from her heart, and the prognosis was kind of up in the air.
Okay.
As a nurse, the family relies on Eileen to reassure them.
Of course, I'll go see her.
I knew in going to see her that there was going to be an expectation that, you know, I was going to get asked questions as to what I thought was transpiring with her and maybe what her overall prognosis might be.
Okay, I'll call you when I get there. Bye, Mom.
With her aunt in another city, Eileen grabs the first flight out and arrives later that evening. She's immediately struck by an ominous feeling.
My aunt was a full-blooded Italian woman, probably as feisty as they come, and growing up, I spent a lot of time with her.
Oh, hello. Hi, Auntie. How you doing?
I'm fine. You're lovely. Thank you.
Eileen's daughter is recently married.
She had 10,000 questions, you know, about the wedding and wanted to see a few pictures.
Oh, beautiful.
Suddenly, I can feel a definite temperature change occurring in the room. Naturally, you look around for an explanation to see maybe the air conditioner is on. But it was just fan air. It wasn't cold air going.
As the temperature inexplicably plunges, so does her aunt's condition.
She had these very strange coughing fits that to the point would scare you because they were actually taking her breath away. I'd get up and get her some water, and I would get it to her, and she would stop coughing.
I'm fine.
Eileen's trained eye knows otherwise.
Her appearance and her demeanor kind of led me to believe that she has cancer and that the cancer had already spread through her system.
Her sadness turns to sudden terror.
Above her head, at the head of the bed, there's this shadow. And I don't know what it is, don't know where it's coming from, but it's just getting darker and darker. As I'm looking at it, I can see more of a head start to appear, and almost kind of a hood. I was frozen in my chair, and I could feel myself shaking. then I see these other outlines looking like wings. I am scared to death right now. I have never seen anything so foreboding in all of my life.
Nurse Ailing Prevet comes face to face with a terrifying entity.
In paranormal lore, these winged creatures seem to have great significance. For example, in the Abrahamic religions, we see different entities coming around called angels in various different forms.
Oh my God.
I had no idea what it wanted, if it wanted something from me or if it wanted something from my aunt.
What do you want?
At that moment, my aunt goes into this coughing fit again. She's coughing and coughing. Her face is getting blue. And it puts its hands on either side of her head. And she stops coughing. I didn't know what he was going to do, but I was worried that maybe he was going to hurt her. I said,
Who are you?
And he said to me, you should know who I am. At that moment, I was taken back a few years prior to a surgery that I had had.
Hovering close to death, Ailing was also visited.
It's your time.
This thing asked me if I was ready. And I said, yes, I'm ready. I says, but I just have one request. I said, let me see my family one last time. And after I made that request, I had an experience where I actually left myself. I actually left my hospital bed.
Astral projection is the idea that we can actually project our consciousness somewhere else. People who have reported being close to death oftentimes get these experiences.
The entity leads her out of her room, through the hospital, and transports her back home.
I was walking through my house, sink full of dishes in my kitchen. I make my way upstairs. I go in, I check on my girls. I check on my son. I check on my husband. I was completely at peace with everything that I saw.
With Eileen's visit done, she's taken back to her hospital room. As she prepares to die, the entity has a change of heart. It's not her time.
The next thing I notice is that I have someone slapping my arm.
When Aileen comes to, all her vital signs are back to normal.
I remember you.
Shh.
you.
He told me he was the angel of death.
Nurse Ailing is haunted by a terrifying encounter with the angel of death.
There's multiple different stories and lore around the Grim Reaper. One theory is that he's there to kill you and take you away.
When I actually got to see his face, he was very, very scary. The thing said, "Don't be afraid." He said, "I am here to help her transition from life to death."
Another interpretation about the Grim Reaper is that he's there to assist you. In this case, Azrael seems to be an extremely benevolent entity. He's considered one of the 7 archangels. So as frightening as the imagery of Azrael is, he seems to be there to help her aunt pass over.
Without warning, he disappears. And returns just as suddenly.
She will die peacefully. We will meet again.
And he just faded away, faded right back into the wall. My aunt died very, very peacefully. And no one could really ask for more.
Ailing alerts the nurses of her aunt's passing. She leaves, shaken by the experience.
It ended on a very, very peaceful but questionable note.
We will meet again.
That was a long drive.
Sure was, but we are here.
Screenwriter Noah Evslin and his wife arrive for an overnight trip to visit his grandmother.
My grandmother had recently moved into a nursing home about 2.5 hours north of New York City. I was very close with my grandmother. We come from a family of writers. She was a writer, her husband was a writer, and my whole life was spent, trying to emulate her.
See you in the morning, Anna. So you actually stayed at her nursing home?
Yeah, there was a room that was available for guests.
Located close to his grandmother's room, the accommodations are convenient, but also unusual.
There was a little living area, everything was clean, and a comfortable looking bed. I realized that this room was identical to the room that my grandmother lived in.
Nana's okay.
Yeah, she's doing good.
We went to sleep at about 10:30, 11, knowing we had to get up early to have breakfast with my grandmother. I made a joke wondering, did somebody recently die here and that's why the room is open?
It was just a joke.
It wasn't funny.
And we went to sleep. And some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to the worst smell that I've ever smelled in my life. And my eyes were burning. It smelled like burning onions. I felt nervous because I thought, where's the fire? I looked around the room. There was no visual signs of smoke. There was no alarms, no one running in the halls. There was just no sounds. The whole facility was asleep.
With each passing second, the horrible smell gives way to something even more vile.
It smelled like a rotten carcass, but not only rotten, but like rancid rotten.
In case of a haunting, you will get like the smell of death, something that's rotting meat, things like that. And it's because they haven't crossed over yet.
I think everyone's experienced what a dead animal smells like. This wasn't dead animal day 1, 2, or 3. This was dead animal like at its peak of pungency. It felt like to me that the smell lasted around 5 minutes. And then it just started to like fade away. So I went back to sleep. And I was lying in the bed when something startled me. There was a man standing in the room staring at me.
Screenwriter Noah Evslin is shocked awake by the dead stare of a shadowy figure.
He had a red flannel shirt on, which matched his red hair and bright red beard. My first thought was that maybe this was a resident who had entered the room. But the room was locked, so how did this person get in here? And also, the man was significantly younger than a resident, and it made me wonder, is this maybe the son of a resident who still had a key? I was filled with adrenaline. I woke up my wife.
What's wrong?
And I said, there's a man in the corner of the room. And when she turned to look, he was gone.
It was just...
My wife never saw him. My wife only saw me probably more scared than she's probably ever seen me then and till today. She knew that I had seen something really horrific. And I said, I think I just saw a ghost. I don't have any other explanation for the thing that I just saw. And so at 2:30 in the morning, we got our stuff, exited the retirement home. We just weren't gonna sleep in that room anymore, and not knowing what the intent of the thing is in the room, whether it was still there. And we drove back to New York City. That's how scared we were.
The next morning, he calls his grandmother.
She thought I was calling her from the room saying, let's go to breakfast. And then I had to sort of sheepishly explain that we had driven all the way back to New York City that night. And then I asked her, you told me that this was like kind of like a hotel where they had rooms for rent. But it's not a hotel, is it? And she said, no, not really, just rooms open up every now and then. And I said, by rooms opening up, do you mean somebody died in the room? And she said, well, yes, that's why they open up. The next question I asked was, the person who died in my room, was it a man? And she said, yes. The man's name was Gary, who used to live in that room, and I was describing the red hair and red beard. And then I asked her, would him be wearing a red plaid shirt make sense? She said, when I knew him, he had a white beard and white hair, but I've definitely seen pictures of him as a younger man, and he had a red beard and red hair. He wore a lot of plaid, and he used to be a hunter in the area. His expression when he was looking at me is frozen in my mind. He seemed confused and sad. Felt like he was confused because he didn't know he was dead, and that somebody was sleeping in his bed.
For a spirit that's recently passed, that definitely could lead to confusion on their part. They don't know what's going on. Time is different in the spirit world than it is in ours. It's not linear. You're not bound by the physical world, the physical realm anymore.
That experience was so terrifying that I decided we were never going to do an overnight trip there again.